So in Exodus chapter 3, I want to talk to you this morning about useless excuses. Useless excuses. I could call this sermon, Get Over Yourself. But I didn't want to come across harsh, so I called it Useless Excuses. So anyway, we're going to look at this, and we're going to start with one of the great excuse makers in all of history, and his name is Moses. Now here's the thing about Moses, he's also one of the greatest leaders in all of history. But he didn't start out that way. He was reluctant. So in Exodus chapter 3, starting in verse 10, God's having this conversation with him. It's a burning bush. So Moses is talking to God at a burning bush, and this is where this conversation leads, which is kind of interesting, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, but it's interesting. He's making excuses while talking to a burning bush. That's just something that catches me weird. So anyway, in verse 10 it says, "Therefore come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt?" And he said, "Certainly I will be with you, and this shall be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you when you have brought the people out of Egypt, and you shall worship God at this mountain." Then Moses said to God, "Behold, I'm going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now then they may say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me." Now imagine if you're God, and for some of you that won't be hard because you think that already. Imagine if you're God and you're coming up with a strategy to free your people from 400 years of bondage. I mean, I'm sitting there thinking about, if you're God, you're looking for a great military leader, maybe a sophisticated diplomat, maybe a legal negotiator, somebody that can do this job. I'm guessing that if you were God, you wouldn't go with an 80-year-old fugitive of justice from Egypt, because that's what God did. God went with this guy named Moses and wanted to send him back to the very place he was wanted. So the reality is that if you're saved and serving, you are all former fugitives. The Bible says that as sinners, we were all condemned. We were all wanted for great crimes against the sovereign and supreme God. So if you're serving today, if you're saved today, you are doing so from the position of you were once a fugitive of God's justice. And so we all kind of qualify in this realm of what Moses is using as this excuse line. So when using excuses, I've always been heard this, when using excuses, anyone will do, and they'll work. If you got in your mind that you're gonna have an excuse not to do something, it doesn't matter what the excuse is, any one of them is gonna get you to what you want, which is not to do something. So excuses are like that. Anyone will do if you're using them. So you gotta look at that. So when God called Moses, he offered some excuses that are still used today in one form or another. And here's what I found about those who are most consistent at making excuses. They're usually the most consistent at making criticisms. Here's what they do. They have excuses of why they don't want to serve, but they can always come up with a reason or a problem for you to find somebody to serve. I mean, I'm just telling you. Those that are most active in making excuses are those that are usually the loudest at making the noise and criticizing what's not happening. Just the way it works. I mean, that's just kind of the way I've seen it. And so, but let's look at some of these excuses that Moses is going to come up with. The first excuse is the excuse of inability. So in verse 11 he says, "But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt?" This is where it starts with getting over yourself. 1 Corinthians 1:26 and 27, for consider your calling, brethren, that there were not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble, but God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. This is one of my verses I quote all the time about why I'm doing what I'm doing. The weak things of the world to shame the things which are strong. I mean, God calls some of the strangest people to do some of the insane things that you'd ever think of. People that from the outside, they don't look qualified. They don't look like they've got the ability to do anything. And he flat out says this in 1 Corinthians, yeah, I enjoy using what the world would see as foolish to accomplish my great work so that everybody would know that the only way this could get done is that if I did it. I mean, that's one of the things he does. I mean, you look at the disciples he chose. I mean, they were a mixed match bunch of, they came out of nowhere. And he even chose somebody that was going to turn him in. I've met people like that. I've asked people to serve and said, we'll turn on you. Can I get a witness? Don't point, it's not nice. If you do that, it's just not nice. So I'm just saying, so here it is. So here's Moses. He said, Lord, I can't do this. Who am I to do this? You see, the only necessary call is obedience. God's work is driven by his promises, not your ability. That's going to be a theme that we're looking at today. So God has called us with full knowledge of what we can and what we can't do, who we are and who we aren't. Listen to this verse in Psalm 103:14. For he himself knows our frame. He is mindful that we are but dust. How's that to encourage you? See, when you're thinking you're all that and can be all this, understand this. God knows your frame, and this is what he says. You're dust. I mean, our theme song should be dust in the wind. All we are is dust in the wind. That should be our theme song, all right? But understanding this, so when you're getting all this stuff thinking, and sometimes you think, well, I can do this or I can do that. But the issue is it's an obedience, and God's asked us to do what God can do. He knows who we are when he's asking us to do it. So God has called us with this full knowledge, and God is not depending on my power to achieve his promises. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. That means that if God has called me to this, that he's going to supply the strength in order to see it accomplishes. So if you're sitting here and going, well, I just can't do that. That's just not, God, that's just the inability thing. Guess what? Moses used the same excuse. And God shot back at him. I know what you can and can't do. All I need you to do is being obedient. I'm calling you to do this. So excuse number one is, I just can't do that. I mean, I talk to people all the time, and they go, well, I just don't know if I can do this. I just don't know. That's not my gift, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. That don't hold water. All right? I'm just saying, that don't hold water. So I'm just saying, it'd be amazing at some of the people that I've seen do some of the things that on the outside, you'd think they could never do it. But they do really, really good work. So the first excuse is this excuse of inability. Then he comes up with inadequacy. I'm just inadequate. Look at verses 13 and 14. Then Moses said to God, behold, I'm going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? So he's sitting there going, Lord, I don't even know what I'm going to say. So what am I going to tell them? I'm inadequate to do this. I don't even have your name in place or anything like this. He's putting on this humility stuff. Now here's the thing about Moses. Moses has been called the most humble man that God's ever known. He's been called that. But in some sense, you get this. There are times when I go and I'll ask somebody to serve, and this is what I get. Well, preacher, I'm just not worthy. I'm not asking because you're worthy. Get over yourself. You're not. I'm not worthy. You're not worthy. Don't give me the false humility, which I think is much more destructive than just abject pride. Why? Because it's being deceitful. You're trying to act like you're not. You're trying to act humble, and you're really being prideful. Well, I'm sorry. I just, Lord, I'm very humble. I like messing with students when they're touring the campus and they're visiting the campus, and I'll go up to them, and some of the students here know what I do. I go up to them because they're touring. I said, hey, I just want you to know that I am the greatest campus pastor at Truett McConnell. and I'm very humble about it. And sometimes they just don't know what to do. And which is one of the things I like to kid around with them. So anyway, but sometimes what we do is when we go, hey, Lord, I can't do this. I don't have it. Now, here's what I believe about Moses. Moses wasn't showing false humility. Moses was just scared. He didn't want to go back to Egypt. He was a wanted man. So he had this issue. And so I don't believe Moses is displaying false humility. I believe he was just scared to go back to Egypt. He was afraid of failure. He was afraid of Pharaoh. But here's the deal. God wasn't looking for a fearless leader, but a faithful one who would obey him fearlessly. See, sometimes we're scared of the wrong thing, which is what Jesus pointed out in Matthew 10:28. Do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. I want to tell you something. My greatest fear today is not what's happening over in Europe. My greatest fear today is not who's running the country. I'm going to say there are moments it does get that way. My greatest fear today is not that. My greatest fear today is that if I've got to be faithful to God, pleasing to him, and sharing the gospel, because the reality of it is, you know something? A nuclear bomb could strike out today. There could be nuclear war today and really kill millions, slaughter millions, which is incredible to think of, millions. But what really bothers me is how many of those millions have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ and where they're going to spend eternity. This past weekend, I spoke at a D Now in Lawrenceville to about 120 high schoolers. We had a couple of students saved. It was a great time and all this kind of stuff. But I just reminded them, hey, we're all made for eternity. You and I are going to spend eternity somewhere. I'm just saying, from the moment we're born, we're eternal beings. And I would say from conception, we're eternal beings. I'll often say, well, we have 3 children, 2 with us and 1 waiting on us because she miscarried. And so we've got 1 waiting up there. And that's our perfect child. That's what I'll tell the other 2. That's the perfect child. So the reality of it is, so we're all going to spend eternity somewhere. That's it. You're going to spend eternity in fellowship and in service to the King in his kingdom of heaven. Or you're going to feel it. Or you're going to spend your life separated in sorrow and torment forever. The issue is, so somebody goes, well, am I eternal? Everyone in this room is eternal. Everyone in this room is eternal. That's why Jesus says in Matthew 10:28, don't fear those who kill the body but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. See, we get scared of so much of the wrong thing. And so Moses, he was afraid to go back to Egypt because he was a fugitive. He didn't want to face Pharaoh, and he's afraid of failure. Remember, Moses has already failed at leadership one time. Y'all remember? You remember Moses? I've shared this before. Well, you know, when Moses tried to lead, he was walking around. He was coming in touch with his Hebrew heritage and everything like this. And he was walking around, and he saw an Egyptian treat an Israelite in a bad way. And he went down there and he killed the Egyptian. Acts tells us that he buried him poorly. So he's feeling pretty good. God's called him to deliver the children. On day 1, he's already delivered 1. But it's the fastest burnout in the history of the Bible. Next day, he's walking around. He's watching the Egyptians and Israelites, and they're fighting. So he's feeling like, oh, good, here comes my another opportunity to be delivered. He goes down there. He's getting ready to break them up. And they look at him because he thinks nobody saw him kill the Egyptian. And they look at him, are you going to do to us what you did to that Egyptian yesterday? So you know what the fearless leader did? He ran. He got out of there. Spent 40 years on the backside of it. So I'm telling you, he burned out in ministry in 24 hours. So he's sitting there thinking, Lord, I've already tried to do this. If I go back there, I've already proven that I can't do this. And here's what God wanted Moses to understand. No, you proved you can't do it without me. That's what you've proven. That you can't do it without me. And so he's having this story of inadequacy. My job is to be faithful and trust God to be God. That's what Noah did when he built the ark. That's what David did when he defeated Goliath. That's what Daniel did and the lions did. And that's what Jesus did on the cross. All of them were put in difficult situations, but all of them understood the reason they were in that difficult situation is because they obeyed God and they trusted God to be God, and they would do what they want to. Stephen, you could say, but hey, wait a minute, Pastor. Stephen was stoned to death. Yeah, but he was obedient, and we're still talking about him. See, here's the issue. If I'm killed in obedience, I haven't failed. I'm successful. Oh, wait a minute. Read Hebrews 11. It tells you that there are some that were killed, and then there's that verse that said, of whom the world is not worthy. This weekend, there was yesterday, 229 believers, Christian leaders in Afghanistan were beheaded. For one reason only. They were believers. That's it. That's it. Would you say they failed? No. No. And that's what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 10. There are a lot worse things than dying. There's living an eternity apart from me. And so you need to understand. So Moses is this second thing is, hey, Lord, I'm inadequate. I can't do it. But then he comes up with another excuse. In chapter 4, verse 1, it's the excuse of inferiority. Listen what he says. Then Moses said, what if they will not believe me or listen to what I say? For they may say, the Lord has not appeared to you. Then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? He said, a staff. And then he said, throw it on the ground. And so he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from it. I would have done the same thing. I mean, I ain't sitting here thinking. There are two kinds of snakes, a live one and a dead one. People ask me all the time, was that a good snake? No, there's no such thing as a good snake. I'm just telling you my life. Now, some of y'all, I understand where y'all are, but they ain't. I'm scared of snakes. Just telling you. Don't sit here, some of y'all going, oh, preacher, you ain't. Thought you was a man. I am. I'm a man that's afraid of snakes. So what Moses is, he's saying, they won't believe me. How am I going to make them believe me? You see, my job is not to convince people of my calling. My job is to be obedient. But the best way to be believable is to be about the work of obedience in a way that is pleasing to God. You see, one person doesn't talk their way into credibility. You walk and work your way into credibility. You want to understand what my calling is. Now, some of you may never understand what my calling is, but God help me if I don't understand it and I don't walk in the calling. The reason so many people are discredited in their calling is because they don't do anything to manifest it. In other words, people get up there and say, well, I'm called, and yet you never see them do anything. They don't work, they don't serve, they do nothing. Nothing. I'm just going to say this, and back in the day, I wanted to learn ministry. You know what I did? Is I went and volunteered at any church that would have me, any place that was doing ministry. I remember in seminary, Stacy and I were riding around. We got a list from the association, so we started riding around trying to find churches that needed help. We stopped at this church over in West Memphis, Arkansas, and they had been looking for a pastor for 3 years. It was a little old church. It was a Wednesday night. You remember this? We walk into their little old church, and we walk in, and all 13 or 14 of them turned around and looked at us. And they were having a Wednesday night supper. And you're in seminary, food is good. So we just went to their Wednesday night supper, and nobody would talk to us. And finally, apparently, somebody got curious enough, and they sat down and said, hey, so welcome, how are you doing? I said, I'm doing fine. They said, well, what brings you to our church? I said, well, I found out that you guys have been looking for a pastor for 3 years. And so I brought my resume and hoped that I would talk to somebody on the pulpit committee or chairman or somebody and see if I couldn't have a conversation about maybe becoming your pastor. They said, oh, we need to take that down. We really aren't looking anymore. And I'm telling you, now, how bad is it that you want to go serve? I mean, I was going to serve for nothing. And how bad must they think I am? You ain't worth free. I mean, that's kind of what I was sitting there thinking. And they ain't heard nothing, not a sermon, anything like that. But here's what they said, no, we're ministering fine right now. We're just going to stay. We've got some people that take turns preaching, and we take care of each other. I mean, you want to talk about us four and no more? I was there. They weren't interested in anything that you are. But I mean, I just would volunteer. I'd do anything I could. I mean, I'd be around it. I mean, listen, I was a gym rat when I was an athlete. I'd go to the gym. I loved being in a gym. I'd play pickup sports. Nobody had to pay me to go to a gym. I went to the gym. I was always working to get better. And same thing in ministry. I'm telling you, my mentor, Michael Guido, said you learn ministry by doing ministry. And you just go do ministry. You get involved in it, and you just go do it. And I would tell any of you today, just whether you're talking about ministry or vocation, just start working. And in today's world, if you'll show up on time and you're willing to work, you'll have a job. It's kind of the qualifications right now. So I'm just saying, you got to understand, when you're doing this, when you sit there and you're trying to convince God, God's calling him, and Moses is trying to dequalify himself and saying, I'm not able to do this. You got to understand, this is the guy that creates him talking to the created one, and the creator is trying to convince the one who created him that he can't do what God knows he can do, and the reason God knows he can do it is because he's the one that's calling him to do it. Moses said, I just can't do it. I'm just inadequate. Can't do it. And then the inferiority, they won't believe what I do. Nobody's going to believe that I'm the one that's calling. You see, here's the thing. The equipping is often in the experience of active obedience. Credibility in service starts with the availability to serve. And I just want you to understand something. If you're saved, you're called to serve in some capacity, in some way. You're gifted uniquely to do some things, but you are definitely called to serve. See, we can become so wrapped up in our own weaknesses and preconceived notions of what something is or isn't that we intimidate ourselves and eventually eliminate ourselves. We can make something that we don't even know into something that we think we know that gets so big that we just don't do it. And you need to understand that the enemy doesn't want you to realize everything that's available to you in Christ to do what he's calling you. David understood this in Psalm 18, verse 29, when he says, for by you I can run upon a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. We have more available to us than we will recognize on this earth. And when we get to heaven, one of the shocking things that we'll see is all that we had that we didn't use. And then the final excuse that Moses throws at him is the excuse of infirmity. Look in verse 10 of chapter 4. Then Moses said to the Lord, please, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. The Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth, or who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? So God says, who made your mouth, dude? Verse 12, now then go, even I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to say. But Moses said again in verse 13, please, Lord, now send the message by whomever you will. Lord, just pick anybody. So here's what God does in verse 14. Then the anger of the Lord burned against Moses, and he said, is there not your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he speaks fluently, and moreover, behold, he is coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. And you are to speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and his mouth, and I will teach you what to say. Hey, here comes Aaron, he's your brother. He can talk pretty good. So here's Moses. He's telling God, the one who created his mouth, says, listen, I can't do this. I can't talk. I can't. And so God's getting angry. You see, it's one thing to be aware of your weakness. It's another thing to allow them to use them as an excuse of disobedience. I'm going to tell you some things that I've learned in this. When I had a speech impediment as a small kid. I mean, I had a stammering tongue. I didn't have stammering feet because I was always into something. But I had a speech impediment. I had what they called a lazy tongue. I would slur my words. And so, I understand that. But at the same time, there are things that you can get in there and understand that you can. There are ways that you can help people and do stuff like this, but we come up with excuse about these infirmities. I can't do this because of what I can't do. I can't talk. I don't do good in front of people. The two greatest fears in the world today are the fear of talking in front of people and dying. I mean, really, the way they say it is, we would rather be the person in the box than the one talking about the person in the box. I mean, people are scared to death to get up in front of people and talk. You know, it can get nerve-wracking. And so you're scared of getting up there. We're just scared to death of talking in front of people. And so Moses, I get it. Moses goes, hey, listen, I don't like talking. I've been hanging out with sheep for 40 years. I'm pretty good with them. You know, they don't talk back. I got a stick. And so they'll do what I ask them to do. But see, we can get inside our own head and so exploit our own weaknesses that we miss out. I remember one of the greatest lessons on leadership and service I learned being a part of a big choir at Bruton Parker College. When I went to Bruton Parker, it was because I had failed out of Georgia Southern. And my dad got me into Bruton Parker with a good donation outside the realm of tuition. That's all I'm going to say. And so he said the lady that was over the choir was Dr. Hildegard Stanley. I'd known her all my life. Great family friend. We called her Hitty. That was her name, Hitty. Now, I didn't know that I was supposed to call her Dr. Stanley as a student. But my dad said, you go see Hitty, you're going to be in the choir. I said, I don't want to be in the choir. He said, no, you're going to be in the choir. Hitty's going to watch after you. She's going to get you in the choir. I said, I don't sing. You're going to be in the choir. So I went in there. And I said, Hitty, Dad said I had to come sing. She said, call me Dr. Stanley. I said, okay, Hitty. I really did. So anyway. I said, so what do I got to do to be in the choir? She said, you got to try out. I said, well, this is going to be easy. I'm fixing to flunk. This is going to be the worst tryout in the history of tryouts. She opened up a hymn. She said, do you know Victory in Jesus? I said, yeah. She said, sing it. So she had her assistant Lisa Urbana sit down, playing the song. She started out, hit that first chord, and I said, victory. She said, good, you're in. What's this? I mean, you really need to hear me sing more. Nope, you're in. I said, come on. She said, nope, you're in. So we get in there, and I mean, this was a huge choir. I mean, like 150 voices in this choir. It was huge. I mean, we used to go sing all over the place. Super talented people. And so we'd get in there and we'd do all these practices. And then it was that. But then she made me take voice. And the reason she made me take voice is because Michael Guido called her and said, Hitty, he needs to take voice. He needs to learn how to control his speech. She said, I can handle it. So I had to take voice lessons. I mean, here's the thing. They recruited musicians and vocalists and singers like Georgia recruits football players. I mean, they would get all excited. Man, we got a first tenor coming on campus today. This is going to be a big deal. They're rolling out the carpet. What is this? What are y'all doing? They sing, all right? When press me, run a 4-4, buddy, and then sing. You know, something like that. So they bring in these people and all this kind of stuff. That's kind of people. So then I'm taking his voice and I'm learning all this stuff about range. I'm learning about pitch and key and all this kind of stuff to try to help my voice not sound so country. As you can tell, it worked wonders. So I'm sitting there learning all this stuff, all about breathing and about where you sing. You sing from here, not here, not here, here. stuff like this. I got designated as I was a baritone, whatever that meant. That I sing in lower registers. So I'm sitting there and you learn all this kind of stuff. But here's the deal. So one day, we'd be out singing all the time. And I just asked Kitty, I said, Kitty, you never sing. It's not my job. My job is to find those who do, train them, and put them in place so that they will succeed. I said, but you're the leader. She said, my job is not to sing, but to build singers. And she said, the other thing my job is to take those, and she was brutal, like you that don't sing well, and help strong singers cover you up. She said, you're a sound maker. And if I can teach you to make sounds in the right way, those who can really sing make you sound really good. And so the reality of it is, everybody will know that you're a part of a choir, but everybody has a role. And my role is to help people get to their role and experience their greatest success. And all of you together make me look really good. And so here's Moses saying, Lord, I can't do this. I can't speak. I can't talk. And so you know what God does? God brings him Aaron, somebody that can speak. I would tell you this. God never intended us to do what he's called us to do by ourselves. Never. And I found out if it's left up to me and me alone, it's not going to go very far. And I'm so thankful that I understand what my weaknesses are, and that I understand that God's called me in spite of my weaknesses, and that he's put people in place around me for his cause to make him look good. So if you're sitting here and you're saying, well, I really can't do anything, I'm not asking you to serve here alone. I'm asking you to take what you can do, put it alongside of some other people that can do some things, and let's get going. It's not. Here's what we need to understand about serving. It's not dependent upon us. What's dependent upon us is obedience upon the one that it depends on. It depends on God. And there's always an excuse. Jesus dealt with excuses. God dealt with excuses. We've always got excuses. There's always an excuse as to why we can't do something. Whether it's time, talent, treasure, money, whatever, there's always an excuse. But I'm telling you something, obedience and availability will beat an excuse down. So what's your excuse for not being serving? Today, well, we really haven't developed anything where I feel good about serving. We got lots of opportunities to serve somewhere. It may not be in your strength, but it's in our need. Why can't you serve? We got accountants and doctors and everything else parking cars and opening doors. We got people doing all kind of stuff. But if we don't start serving where we are, we're not going to have a service of where we need to be. Got quiet. I had it in my notes that y'all were supposed to amen right there. This will cause amen. I didn't really write that down. I just thought I'd share it with you. Because I thought it should have. You don't learn what you are in service until you start serving. I always had in my mind that I would do student ministry until I died. All I ever want to do is student ministry. That's it. I just want to do student ministry. That's it. That's it. I didn't ever want to serve to become a senior pastor. I just want to do student ministry. And I just enjoy being, because first off, it's a hotbed for evangelism. most people that get saved do so between the ages of 12 and 18. I mean, that's really 85% of all those people that come to Christ do so in that age bracket. I mean, it's the hotbed. I love seeing people come to Jesus. I mean, and students are in that. And just start. And here's the thing, students just, they'll tell you. And so when you get into student ministry, you get into parent ministry. Because I found out student ministry was all about parent ministry because, we just had to work with parents. I mean, this is what it was. And so I was on my way to my first pastorate. I was on my way to Oviedo, Florida, at First Baptist Oviedo to become their college, to be their pastor of evangelism in college. That's where I was going. And then this little church called River Bend called. It's a dysfunctional church. It was a church that had split, and more splits. I was 30 years old. I was sitting there thinking, I'm too young to go be a preacher right now, be a lead pastor. I mean, I'm just too young. There were 81 people. The average age was 69. They had 27 committees. Any volunteers? And I'm just telling you, they were in a mess. And so we were going to Oviedo. We'd already been there. We picked out a house. We had a nice house picked out. I mean, it was in a cool neighborhood right outside of Orlando. I mean, it had really good, that nice grass. It had a screen around the pool. I mean, to a 30-year-old and a 27-year-old or 28-year-old, a house with a pool, you could only dream about it. I mean, in seminary, we would ride around and look at houses and think, we'll never be able to live in that. And these were like 1,200 square foot houses. We'll never have anything that nice. So we saw this and we were getting ready to go. And then finally they called one more time and said, would you really consider it? And so long story short, God moved. And so I went into the senior pastor right there at River Bend, and it's been that way ever since. But I never felt like, hey, this is what I needed to do. But here's the deal. Obedience overrides it. And you do what God's called you to do. And the only way you learn is you're obedient. And there are things that God equipped me in and the experiences He gave me that if I would not have been obedient and at least engaged in where I started, I didn't get anywhere. So it's the economy of God. Be obedient where you are and trust God to take you where He wants to. But listen, if you're not obedient in the small things, you're not going anywhere else. You're not going anywhere else. Just be obedient in that area. Do what you can do with what you have and help make it better, help make it stronger, build up the body of Christ. But for all that's necessary, quit making excuses about what you can't do because it's not there yet, or it's not in your wheelhouse, or it's your ability, or whatever. Get in and do something. Get in and do something. Just do something. The other day we were unloading chairs, weren't we? We were unloading chairs. And the guy was up there, and the chairs were up here on the truck, and we were down here. And he was sitting there trying to figure out, he was fixing to unwrap them and unload them chair by chair. I just grabbed that lift thing, cranked it up, moved it into the back of that truck, loaded up them chairs, and pulled it down and sat it down on the ground. This dude looked at me and said, "How you do that?" You operate that. He's not from around here. You operate that. No, first time I ever used it. So Lisa and Lauren are looking at it and said, "How did you do that?" Well, I mean, it's not real hard. It's got a handle, so you figure out it rolls up and rolls down. And it's got those slots that stick out, so you figure out it's got to go somewhere. And you just roll it up in there, and then you roll it back up. It's just a dynamics where you figure it out, and then you pull it back out. And here's the deal. What happens if it falls off? Then we got to do the chairs one at a time. But if it stays on, we've made a great victory. I'm not trying to brag on myself, but if I'm sitting there trying to wait on somebody else to show up to give a seminar on how to use that, or saying we just don't have it, I'm not qualified, I don't have a union card, or just do what has to be done because you're available and they're doing it. That's just it. Just do what has to be done. And because you're available and you can figure it out sometimes, you just figure it out. And if it makes a mess, at least make a mess being obedient and useful instead of making a mess, wagging your tongue, complaining about it. Because you're going to make a mess both ways. You're going to make a mess about what's not working. You're going to make a mess about what you can't do and what can't do. So I'd rather make a mess doing something that moves us forward than making a mess complaining about what's not happening. Whew, I'm preaching now. I was wondering if I was ever going to get there this morning. But I'm just telling you. I'm just saying. So why am I preaching this right now? Because we're moving forward. And what we need is people to serve. There's a board out there that says, can you serve here? There are children over here that need people to serve over here. There are students that need your help and service. There are things that we've got to do in the future that I'm going to let you know that need your service. We need servants. That's what we need. People that'll roll up their sleeves and not get in their head about what they can't do, but get in their heart about what God has called them to do and get it done. Amen. Get it done. Because Jesus is coming. We got work to do. And he asked, will I find faith when I come back? Let him find faith here. Let him find servants here. Let him find soul winners here. Let him find stuff. Is it going to be messy? Yes. Is it going to be hard? Yes. You know, the easiest thing to do is to get to a place that we're in control and can handle it and don't need anything. The hardest thing to do is to raise up servants, to encourage servants, to cheer on servants. That's the hardest thing to do. But that's the way God's got it designed. And therefore, we're going to work in that design. And I want to be a part of that design. I want to be a part of seeing God do something out of nowhere. Do you understand? Over a year and a half ago, this church was dying and done. So if you're sitting there, well, maybe God's not in it. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Look at what we're doing. Look at what God's doing. Look at the ministries that are going. Look at what's happening. Can you not get it? In September of 2020, there were 40 people here. There was no student ministry, no real children's ministry. There was nothing going on. We didn't have a Wednesday night. On Wednesday night, we got close to 200 people showing up for ministry, either to be taught, teach, serve, or do something. My question is, why are you here? I don't want to grow a church of listeners. I want to grow a church of laborers. And I want what we do in here to stir you up, to call you to a good work, to say, be a part. And we got stuff that we've got to do, and we're not there yet. But start doing what you can do now. Whether it's helping park cars, usher, greet, work in child care, student ministry, wherever you can go, get there. And man, I'm just telling you, you can hold babies. Those little boys over there need to see men serving. Amen. Y'all hear me? They need to see you serving and teaching. The reason we're losing men is men aren't teaching men. We need men to teach. We need men to lead, and it starts over in that room over there. We need men that'll teach small children, small boys, little girls what real men look like, so they'll know what real men look like when it's time to meet real men. Real men serve. We need service. I'm not disqualifying you from child care or child ministry. I don't like child care, child ministry. We're going to minister. We need men to serve in student ministry. They need to see what men look like over here. Don't tell me, well, I can't lead, and then you go out and coach a T-ball team. What you talking about, dude? If you can lead a T-ball team, you can handle student ministry. I'm telling you, leading T-ball is like herding cats. You can do it. Bring the bat if it makes you feel better, okay? I'm just saying. What's the crux? As long as we make excuses, we'll never achieve excellence. Well, what does excellence look like? When God gets the glory for the service that we do, we will be excellent. So So you can be a part of the excuses or you can be a part of the excellence. You can. You can. What will you do today? Some of you have made excuses about why you're not even saved yet. Well, I'm not saved because every time I turn around, I just, I see a bunch of hypocrites. I mean, really. I'm not going to hell because somebody else don't get it right. I'm saved because one person has it right, and that's Jesus. And so I'm going to follow Jesus. So look to him. If you want to see salvation, look to Jesus. Look to him. And there are saints out there getting it right. Get with them. You use an excuse, well, it's just not time. Here's what Scripture says. Today, if you hear his voice, don't harden his heart. Today is the day to be saved. Today. You're not promised tomorrow. Today is the day. How do you know it's time for me to be saved? Because it's today. Jesus only saves on days that begin with T. Today and tomorrow. And tomorrow's on the devil's calendar, so don't pay attention to it. Today's on Jesus' calendar. Why not get saved today? Why not act today? Today is the day of obedience. Now is the time of obedience. Quit making excuses. And be saved today. Quit making excuses. And get out of the mess that you're fighting right now. Whatever it is that you're in. And repent and start living righteously before God in Jesus Christ. Today's the day. Get deliverance today. Get freedom today. Get hope today. Today. I just told you there's an idiot with his hand on a switch for a nuclear bomb. And you feeling good about tomorrow? Today. Well, what happens if it all ends tomorrow? We were obedient today. And may the last day we exist be the most obedient day we've had. Today.
For more content like today's podcast, click right here. For sermons, click right here. And again, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Have a blessed day.